When Christopher Nolan was 28, he made a few short films and was working a day job making boring corporate videos. He hadn't gone to film school, but his passion and curiosity for filmmaking allowed him to teach himself everything he needed to know. So he and some friends got together to make their first feature film. What they wound up with was Following, Nolan's debut feature, which paved the way for one of the most successful filmmaking careers in history. So here's how he did it, and how with today's technology, you could do the same thing at a fraction of the budget that he had. Now, if you haven't seen Following, I won't spoil anything here. All you need to know is that it's a noir film with a non-linear story structure that jumps around in time and place, like many of Nolan's films. He didn't have access to star actors back then. In fact, his lead actor was a producer on the film. This non-linear style of storytelling he used was the film's real star, and it's what made the film stand out. Since everybody had full-time jobs, the way he went out and put the movie together was to film on weekends over a very long period of time, many months. So I love that about how this film was made. It makes making a feature feel very doable, like it's just another long-term project, like remodeling your house or getting in shape. You know, you just chip away and eventually you'll get there. Another thing Nolan did for this project that I use for every film that I do now is that the beginning and the end of his film, he really focused on making sure the production value was there. He figured, I'm going to make the first scene look very controlled and smooth. This is going to be the only time that I have a dolly. This is going to be the only time I have a sound controlled environment. So I'm going to get great audio. I'm going to get very controlled visuals, good lighting.
No, I'm a writer. Well, I want to be a writer anyway.
And then as the film goes on and Nolan breaks into this handheld, very documentary style filmmaking, the audience instinctively thinks, oh, that was a creative choice because I just saw this slick professional filmmaking at the beginning. Now this is a choice that's being made creatively. Once you've set your audience up in the beginning, ideally your story is going to be good enough. Now they're hooked into it, and that story is going to be what's maintaining their engagement through the middle of the film. And then again at the end, you want that ending to look really professional because the viewers are going to walk away thinking that the whole film looked like that because it was the last image that got put into their head. And Last Laugh Inc. was a very low budget film. It was just all dialogue. So I wanted the intro to have a bunch of different types of shots, get a dolly shot in there, get him looking through this curtain, get a slow-mo thing. And then at the end, I wanted to mix it up and do some fun stuff for the credits and then have this other setup at a different location. This technique is scalable to all budget levels. Why not start and end with your best foot forward, right? Filming on 16mm film stock, obviously lighting is a very real concern. So they tried to use natural lighting wherever they could. A lot of window lights. He would intentionally block scenes so that they took place right next to windows for the actors to get that natural light on them. And by shooting in black and white, he was able to create a very stylized aesthetic very cheaply because you can just shoot hard lights at your actors and you get a very fun noir style look. Nolan said that if he tried to do the same thing in color, there's no way he would have been able to achieve a clear-cut aesthetic the way he did in black and white. Film stock and processing is just really expensive, and it was back then too. So that is where the vast majority of Nolan's budget went. To maximize the film that they were able to work with, they did not shoot coverage. So basically, they're shooting, say, two actors talking, close-up of one actor, close-up of another actor, maybe there's a two-shot at some point in the scene. He said, I would literally jump out to the two-shot for the two lines that they said that I knew I would want in the final edit, and I wouldn't shoot anything else in the two-shot. And the other way he saved money on film stock was by rehearsing his actors very thoroughly beforehand, and they never did more than 1 to 2 takes for every shot. But man, it is impressive how good his actors did.
New haircut, new set of clothes. Your mother won't recognize you. I mean, just because you break into people's homes doesn't mean you need to look like a burglar.
Now, this is all terrifying to do. You're basically saying, I will not cover my own ass at all. I will not shoot coverage. I will not shoot extra takes. But if you do this, whether you're on film or on digital, it's very risky, but it will make everything so much cheaper and so much easier down the line. That means you're spending less time filming, way less time editing. You're gonna need less storage to put all the footage on. Everything becomes easier, becomes cheaper, becomes quicker. Of course, Nolan created Following before HD cameras were even around, so you and I have a huge advantage when it comes to creating that gritty noir aesthetic without the cost and headache of shooting on actual film. Which brings me to this video's sponsor, FilmConvert Nitrate. This is a plugin that works with most major editing programs that emulates 19 different real film stocks. And the best part is the company has broken down all the most popular camera models' sensors to understand how they process light and color and better match the film look to your specific camera. For example, check this out. I'm filming this on my Panasonic GH5S. All I gotta do is throw on the Nitrate plugin, choose my camera model, choose my picture profile, and then just choose any of these 19 different film stocks to start playing with it. Let's try this Kodak one. Already looks way more cinematic and film-like. From here, I can play with the color correction and grain settings as much or as little as I like to achieve my desired look. To get something close to Nolan's following look, let's try throwing on this Kodak Tri-X film stock, put it at 16mm, and boom, how cool is that? So lose that cheap digital look on your projects and elevate your footage with this FilmConvert Nitrate plugin. And if you use the link in my description, you get 10% off, or just put in the promo code STANDARD at checkout. I love this tool. Hope you guys try it out and enjoy it. Back to the video. As I've said in many videos, audio is crucial for a no-budget film, and it's the #1 place where everybody messes up. One thing Nolan did to save money is if the audio was bad in a take, they would cut the camera and immediately jump into what he called a dry take, or what I would call getting wild audio of the exact same scene. So he would have the actors redo the entire scene just with the sound recorder rolling, which is going to be a lot cheaper than having the camera roll. If it was right after a take, the actors would be pretty fresh with how they just performed it, and they could match it up pretty good. He didn't have the budget to do ADR down the road, so doing these dry takes is how he was able to save scenes that had weak audio. And interestingly, Nolan says he used the exact same technique of calling cut and immediately jumping into these dry takes during The Dark Knight. He was having Christian Bale and Heath Ledger go through the scene again for the dry takes for the audio. From what I hear, Nolan hates ADR. Maybe that's why his films don't always have the clearest dialogue.
Gotham! Take control of your city.
Found it, 11 o'clock on my mock footage tube.
For no-budget films, locations are very difficult. Their lead actor slash producer, Jeremy Theobald, was often responsible for finding these locations, and they'd be changing at the last minute. He'd have to go find some place the night before they shot. This is the exact same scenario that I ran into with my second feature film, The Hands You Shake. We wrote way too many locations. It was an urban setting film, and we were just running around town, just grabbing anybody's apartment we could get, any back alley we could find, and just making it work. But for their film, the locations included Christopher Nolan's parents' home and various friends' apartments. He also filmed in and around his college and out on the streets. So they used a smaller wind-up film camera out on the streets to avoid bypassers looking into the camera and to avoid problems with the police. And at the end, the last shot, he actually filmed it from waist level intentionally to avoid people walking by the camera even having the chance of looking into the lens. He also said that rooftops were an ideal location for some of the scenes in this film because it was the only way he could get a very public exterior view with privacy. And if you're setting a film in a big city like London, you're gonna wanna see London, right? So setting these scenes up on a rooftop gave you that vista, gave you that setting and texture without having to deal with any of the problems that come with shooting exteriors. Extras were very hard to come by, as they always are for no-budget projects. So for any public location scenes, the crew and Nolan's family would usually be there to fill up the bars and cafes. Basically, everybody who worked on the movie also worked as an extra at some point. As far as the props and art direction, Nolan didn't want to include anything in the film that might betray his tiny budget, so he avoided things like fake guns. He felt that in no-budget films, guns never really worked well, so he avoided them entirely and wrote a hammer as the key weapon in the film, because a hammer is really easy to just get a real hammer, and he could even make a rubber replica of the hammer very cheaply and easily and have it look completely real.
Hammer time!
Likewise, he used only real lived-in locations for every apartment scene. That way each apartment location had a ton of texture and character already built in. Insert shots like this were really heavily used in the film, and he claims that this was a story choice because key props like this played an important part in the film and grounding the time and location of the characters. But he also admitted that it was a producing choice because insert shots are much easier to light well than any wide shot. You can get your lights right off camera and take your time setting up the shot, even filming it at a different location if you need to. So these shots are usually visually very appealing and spice up what may have been a bland or underlit scene otherwise. So I guess the relevant question for us, the modern filmmakers, is if we were to go out and make Following today, would it hold up? Would it do anything? Would we be Christopher Nolan in a few years if we made Following right now? And honestly, maybe. I actually went into the viewing thinking that this was not gonna hold up at all, and it was just gonna be another wave on the beach if somebody came out with this movie today. But here's the thing. One, it is shot on film, which now in this day and age is not a no-budget film move. That is a difficult, kind of attention-grabbing move, especially for something so low budget. But with FilmConvert Nitrate, you could always just fake that. I won't tell nobody. And then you have this super non-linear story structure. You watch the entire movie trying to just figure out what's going on and get your footing, but the acting is good, so you're along for the ride and you want to see where this is going to go. And then once you finally get to the ending, you want to watch it again because you just started to understand it and you're like, oh wait, so everything I just watched, I was looking at it the wrong way. I could watch it again and get a completely different experience off of it. And that's great filmmaking. That's how you take advantage of your limited resources when you don't have star actors, you don't have big budget scripts and explosions you can throw in there. You can do the same thing with how you're structuring your story. And the fact that he had Memento, his follow-up movie, written by the time that Following was going out to film festivals and starting to get a lot of attention, he was just completely set up for success because Memento is the movie that really blew him up, and that is the movie that developed these non-linear storytelling techniques that he started with Following to the next level. What I really wonder is, what would Nolan do if he was starting fresh today? How would he use the amazing tools and technology that we now have access to stand out from today's crowd of filmmakers? Well, in my opinion, Nolan would use many of the same production techniques he used back then today if he was coming up, with the notable exception of shooting his film digitally. Now, Nolan's famous for only shooting on film, but if he had no budget to work with, like his $6,000 first film, I just can't imagine him using all of that money on film stock when there's so many great digital tools like FilmConvert Nitrate to achieve a very similar look that are just readily available. But besides that, everything would be the same, and he would turn his focus once again to creating another innovative story, because that is really where the rubber meets the road with any film, but especially a no-budget film. You have to be making something that makes people want to tell everybody they know that they have to see your film. So if your story isn't bold enough, isn't innovative enough, isn't exciting enough to do that, then that's where you need to be focusing as a no-budget filmmaker. And if you enjoyed this video, check out my Patreon. I post exclusive weekly videos there as well, and I just did one going more in depth about how Nolan made Following for $6,000 versus how I made my first feature film Bad is Bad for $6,000 10 or 11 years later. So many of the techniques he used, I just unknowingly copied what he did. But either way, I hope this video about Nolan's come up makes going out there and making your own film feel attainable and doable, because guess what? It is. So get out there, start making your films, telling your stories, and who knows, maybe you'll be the next Christopher Nolan. Thanks for watching and following.